session items. Mr. George.
Yes, Madam President. I move to appoint Janae Montmeyer to the position of internal auditor.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. George and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, Madam President, I move to appoint Daniel Emery to the position of elementary school assistant principal and to approve him as a professional development and appraisal system PDOS appraiser for 2014-15 pending his completion of the appraiser qualifications according to the Commissioner's rules concerning educator appraisal provided in the Texas Administrative Code.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rosenthal and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mr. Burdine.
I move to appoint Sarah LaBerge to the position of high school associate principal and to approve her as a professional development and appraisal system appraiser for 2014-15, according to the Commissioner's rules concerning educator appraisal provided in the Texas Administrative Code.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Burdine and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mrs. Tassan.
Madam President, I move to appoint Dena Hill to the position of Executive Director of Special Education.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tassan and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Thank you very much. I believe that's all of our closed session items. Next, we have the board members' activities reports. Mrs. Bailey.
Okay. We've attended the CHASB Legislative Press Conference in Austin on May 6th, Audit Committee meeting, Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce TAMSA presentation, Youth and Philanthropy Luncheon, Gulf Coast Area Association of School Boards meeting, Teacher of the Year banquet, varsity softball and baseball games and playoff games. Go Elkins. Let me see here. I got lost there, getting so excited about them. Okay.
Sure, Mrs. Kaiser will get that in the minutes.
I know. Teacher Appreciation Week events, Fort Bend ISD Athletic Signing Day, Fort Bend Education Foundation Grant Ceremony and Donor Reception, Staff Service Awards, Baines Choir Pop Show, Baines 7th Grade Awards, Central Fort Bend Leadership Closing Retreat, Heritage Rose Elementary Heritage Night, Senate Education Committee Legislative Hearing, and Houston Galveston Area Council Board Meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. Do we have any board member special reports? All right, hearing none, we're on to the consent agenda. Before we have a motion for the consent agenda, I'd like to remove item 11G from the consent agenda. Are there other items to remove from the consent agenda, or I'll entertain a motion for the rest of the consent agenda?
Madam President, I move to approve consent agenda items 11A through K minus 11G as you suggested, as presented.
I have a question on 11I6. So
We can still entertain
ask that
questions.
quickly. I'd rather not pull it off, but just if we could just get a quick question.
So we just need a second for the consent agenda. All right, so we have a motion for the consent agenda items A through K, less item G. And now we have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Tassan. And now we will have discussion. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, on the student transportation services, Mr. Cleaver, is that something, the question that came up earlier during audience items, is that something that you could address as to why?
Yes, sir. In regard to the overall cost to the district?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Let me get to that tab right quick.
Actually, I think Mr. Fazakli's prepared to address that.
I was going to say a few words, and then Bob is going to do it, if that's okay. Primarily, there's a couple of items that I can address, and then Bob can elaborate on them. The escalation clause in the contract was more advantageous on the particular vendor we selected, and also the age of the buses was more advantageous with the vendor we selected. And due to that, one of the things, the spinoff of the age of the buses was the fuel economy of the newer buses we believe to be more advantageous. But if Bob has more to add to that, those were the three items that I was aware of.
There we go.
Green light.
Okay. Yes, the two criteria that Mr. Smith mentioned are actually intended to capture quite different cost elements. So the first item he mentioned, the purchase price, is intended to capture the cost that the vendors quote in their proposals with as little interpretation as possible by the committee. And Mr. Smith is absolutely correct on that piece. First Student did quote the lowest price in their proposal. The other criterion which Mr. Smith mentioned, the long-term cost to the district, is intended to capture those other cost elements that are not in the proposals proper, but nevertheless costs that would accrue to the district should the district choose one vendor or the other. And those costs are, as Mr. Cleaver mentioned, such things as the cost of maintenance, the cost of fuel, the cost of anticipated replacement, and so forth. So in the case of the two vendors, Mr. Smith's company, First Student, quoted 2008 buses, and the vendor that we are recommending to you this evening quoted new buses, complete with air conditioning. So we feel that all those elements that are cost elements associated with the difference in the age of the buses are elements that we brought to bear in that long-term cost to the district, which is why Mr. Smith's competitor scored higher on that criterion.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have additional questions or comments?
Not on that subject. Can I call on? I have a question or maybe a comment about C, item 1 or 2, both maybe.
Yes. Items. Anything else on that particular one on the student transportation? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. George, then on item C.
Yeah.
The professional service agreements.
Yeah, service agreement. And I actually already, we discussed this, and I just wanted to make a comment on the record. It says, talking about the interview committee consists of the original 4-person evaluation team with addition of Jacob's program director. What I'm trying to say is that I think, in my humble opinion, a vendor being a voting member on that committee is not, I don't think that is appropriate, but at least moving forward, a vendor should be an observing member of that committee, and also the administration's, the highest ranking officer's chief operations officer should be a voting member and not an observing member. And moving forward, I hope we look into that direction, because that makes more sense. And quite a number of people I talked to, they felt the same thing in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George, for those comments and reiterating that. Do we have any other questions? Mr. Burdine.
On item I-8, the automobile and truck tires, do we have a policy on when we use retreads? Do we use retreads on buses, or is that just for our larger trucks?
I'm going to turn that one over to Mr. Brassfield.
We do use retreads on the rear tires only of school buses.
And I assume we don't have a history of ever that being an issue, or I guess that's something that's common to do.
It is common in our industry, and we do get a lot of wear. As a matter of fact, some of the retread tires last us longer than the original tires.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have any other questions? I have a comment, Mr. Cleaver. This is for you, and this is regarding I-4, which is the foundation and exterior brick repairs at Ridgemont Elementary. And I noticed that you noted in the agenda item that this is work that the board had previously voted on, and it maybe fallen through the cracks and not been accomplished. So then I went to look at the construction reports to sort of see what all was there, and I couldn't find the February report, and I couldn't find the April report, though there is a March report there. So perhaps these types of projects, we can keep track of them better if we can get these reports up to date and get them out and published on the website. And so I'm going to look forward to that, because we certainly don't want this project at Ridgemont Elementary School to fall through the cracks again, nor do we want any of the other projects that we're starting to fall through the cracks. And I just want to be sure that we have a good system in place to keep up with all these projects. So I know we have a lot going on. So we'll look forward to hearing reports on a regular basis.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Do we have any other comments or questions?
Yes.
Mr. Rice.
Madam President, in keeping with your comments, I would like to reiterate my request to have a schedule of the bond program projects. We have one, but it's too small to read. So I've requested that before. I'd like to get a copy of that.
Yes, Mr. Rice, I actually spoke to Mr. Hollyhead at the interim, and we are working on that 11 by 17 in large format.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have further discussion? Mr. George?
One more item I just wanted to bring it to your attention is item item number 10, beverage vending machines. And I think we discussed about it before, but I don't know why we have unhealthy eaters. We don't sell that.
No.
Oh,
We don't. Well, maybe someone from the administration can correct me if I'm wrong, but only water is available for students to purchase through the vending machines.
Sure.
And then other drinks are available, but only for the teachers and staff in locations that students don't have access to.
yeah, but about when it comes to snacks, the ice creams and these and that available in school system, again, that's what I understand. I could be stay corrected on that.
I don't believe that's correct, but maybe somebody can, with actual exact knowledge, can comment.
Mr. Cleaver or Mr. Fazackerly?
I haven't personally been out to the schools to check, but I can tell you the vendors are charged with providing only healthy snacks and drinks in the machines that the students will have access to. Now, if the machine is going to be in a teacher's lounge or something like that, well, that's different. But Mr. George, if you'd like us to do an audit on that, just to check a few schools, we'd be happy to do that, to assure that the vendors are actually doing what they say they're doing. But we have definitely charged them with appropriate snacks to be available for the children.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is something I heard. I don't have any facts. I didn't go and check, but I heard some kids were buying ice creams and this and that. But
Well-
again, I'm just saying, as much as we can provide healthy snacks, healthy drinks.
But I think
That's
I
what we
can,
wanted.
Mr. George, I think I can add to that a little bit. We are bound by state law related in regard to what we sell. Now, some ice creams do qualify as healthy food, depending on the portion size, the fat content, the sugar content, and those kinds of things. But it's just like in the cafeteria lines. We're very bound by those laws, and we cannot violate them. So We hold a tight line with our vendors, but there are certain things that some people might consider unhealthy that, well, I guess I always look at it from the moderation perspective. Anything is unhealthy if you eat too much of it. And so the goal would be, we want to honor the law, but we also want to sell things kids will eat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. All right. Any further discussion? So we're ready to vote on the consent agenda. Please vote as proposed. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we'll consider item 11G. I move that a meeting of the Board of Trustees be called for 5:30 p.m. on June 1st, 2015 at the Fort Bend ISD Administration Building Boardroom for the purpose of discussion and possible adoption of the 2015-16 budget and tax rate.
Second.
Made a motion regarding the budget and tax rate meeting, and seconded by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Now we're on to action. Item 12A. This is regarding the sale of bonds. Do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12A as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Item 13 is a review of the future board meeting agenda items. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, ma'am. Next Tuesday, May 26th, we have a board workshop beginning at 6:30 p.m. to discuss the educational specifications for new school construction. That'll probably be a 2.5 to 3 hour workshop. On June 1st, then at 5:30, as you've just called, we're going to do our public budget hearing. And then that same evening, we'll do another legislative update, further discuss any budget matters, along with an employee benefits update that we'll do later this month. I provided you a long list of all the various items that we'll seek approval on in June. None of them are really extraordinary. They're things that are required to get school opened up, like moving, like portable buildings set up and those kinds of things. Just long-term routine transactions. And then if you look forward to July, we have one meeting scheduled for July on the 21st. And so we're going to have a pretty long gap there between the June, July, and then the August meetings. But we're going to try to keep the July meeting relatively lean because it's in the middle of vacation season. A lot of staff will be in and out, as well the board will be traveling as well. So we're going to try to give you a little break, and we'll try to get some break time in there as well. As you can see, just on upcoming items, there are some things we're looking forward to in August, like the FBISD fiscal strategy, our tax rate adoption, and then we need to look at our, we're going to be looking at some various policies during the coming months, but we're going to schedule out a policy review that the board will engage in over the next 9 to 12 months as well. So you can kind of see we have a building list of items that we're going to get on the agenda during the coming year as they fit into the schedule. Any thoughts or questions on any of that?
Well, I'll just make a comment for the public. You mentioned we're only having one meeting in July, and you'll note that it is on a Tuesday, which is not our normal practice. So for those folks who attend board meetings on a regular basis, you should recognize that that meeting's actually on a Tuesday due to a board training conflict that spills into Monday. Do we have any other questions for Dr. Dupree about agenda items or upcoming items? Okay, well then before we go on to our next agenda item, I'd just like to say a few words and particularly to recognize Mrs. Bailey and thank her for her service to the Fort Bend Independent School District and to the Board of Trustees. Jenny and I campaigned together the first time 3 years ago, and I got to know her on the campaign trail, which was a lot of time in T-shirts and at forums and block walking and handing out flyers and kind of learning our way. And some things that I really appreciate about Jenny is her persistence in the issues that are facing the school district, and her persistence in reminding us of them on a regular basis and holding us accountable for serving all the students in Fort Bend. And I appreciate that. You didn't let us forget stuff. You always ask very tough questions. You're passionate about students in Fort Bend ISD. You're very knowledgeable about what's gone on here and what's going on. And we thank you very much for bringing all of that to us and being very faithful in your duties over the last 3 years. So thank you, Jenny, very much. Would any of the other trustees like to make comment, Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes. Wow. It's been 3.5 years, really. 3.25 years since, if you conclude the campaign. As many of you know, Jenny and I also campaigned together almost every day in between the 11 candidate forums we had that year. It's, 3.5 years ago, I really didn't know you. And we've had some interesting times. There's been a lot of times of stress, and but there's been a lot of times of laughter too, So it's been really difficult, but we've had a lot of fun. And I will just tell one story that probably you and your E-team may appreciate. It's been said by a very trusted source who's in this room that when a former superintendent saw Mrs. Bailey and I gaining steam in the 2012 election, he put his house up for sale. And so a lot of you wouldn't be here right now had we not taken upon that challenge. And one of these days we are going to write a book, as we've joked about. I promise it will be humorous. There'll probably be some music in there too. But again, on the serious side, there's nobody that's worked harder for these kids. 20 to 30 hours was probably average per week. And, all those weeks that we had meetings 6-7 days in a row, it's a lot of work. And I know I appreciate it, and I know 73,000 kids appreciate your effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Burdine, do you have a comment?
I could say a lot of things, but I wanted to thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your knowledge, and thank you for your service. And I appreciate all the thankless hours, and we'll miss you, and I just can't thank you enough.
And I would like to thank you for your service to the students of this school district, their parents, their teachers, administrators, and our community.
No, it's not enough.
Mrs. Tossan?
So I've had
Put Kleenex up here. Dave.
I've had about a year to see exactly how much work it takes to sit up here and how much work it takes behind the scenes. And so while it's really easy to acknowledge the work that you do in the public eye and have done in the public eye over the last 3 years, I would also like to acknowledge the amount of work that you've done behind the scenes, for being willing to step up and sacrifice time with your kids, time with your family, because I certainly can relate to that. I'd like to thank Bob, and I'd like to thank your kids for allowing you to do it, because as we all know that sit up here, if you don't have that kind of support, then you can't do this. So one of the things I texted you was, don't stop working for the kids, and I know that you won't, and I just want to say thank you.
Mr. George?
I wanted to add, just piggyback on what Kristen said, and I greatly appreciate your passion. And I know that last 3 years, a lot of things during your tenure you accomplished, and appreciate your work, and appreciate your families allowing you to do that, and thank you, and please continue to do what you do good at advocating for our children. Thank you.
I think it's unanimous, Jenny.
Well, we're not done yet,
Oh, no.
because I have a present. But I also just have to say, Jenny, when I interviewed for this job, I still remember meeting you for the first time, you and Dave, over lunch with Italian food, and you all just shot straight with Siege and me about what was going on in the district. Of course, I already knew because I'd done a lot of homework, and you even noted that during one of the interviews. You said, he's done his homework. And so I knew what I was coming into, and you haven't disappointed me. You have been tough on us. You've held me accountable, but you've also been very supportive, and I appreciate that, because I always know I can rely on you to do your homework, to be well prepared for every discussion and every decision, and that's what it takes. So I look forward to knowing you and continuing a relationship in another role, and as a mom and community member, and I know you're going to continue to hold us accountable, and we appreciate that. So on behalf of the staff, I want to give you a nice little present, because you touched a lot of lives. You're very welcome. What it is, it's a bracelet that represents infinity, because you don't know the number of lives you've touched is countless. In only 3 years, you've touched thousands of lives for a long time into the future.
Thank you. I just want to say that First Colony Middle School is already recruiting me to be the treasurer of the PTO.
And I can also tell you that one of the most important words you can learn as a volunteer is no, no, no.
At least you don't have to do CFR reports for that.
Well, thank you for volunteering with us. All right, we're ready to move on now to administer the oath of office to the newly elected trustees. I don't know how that works. Solemnly swear that I will trustee for Fort ISD, state of Texas, and serve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and this state. The board will now convene in closed session under the Texas Open Meetings Act to discuss the selection of board officers for 2015-2016. Board's now convened in closed session.